as people start to use AI more and more, what was the bar is going to shift higher. And so, what was okay yesterday is not going to be okay tomorrow. I think we may be overestimating the number of people who are actually using it right now. I think we could also be overestimating how much, in terms of cost savings, that it actually will achieve. Because if the only reason is someone's doing it for cost savings, I think that's going to be a problem. I think that we are underestimating.
Where do you think accounting actually is with AI right now? And what is the part of that picture that most people are just getting wrong?
I would say we're still on the early end, and I think we still have significant work to do. I think we should move quickly, but we should move prudently with discipline quickly, not just quickly, because moving quickly just to keep up with the Joneses is not going to be a path for success.
Welcome to the AI Native Accounting Podcast presented by Digits. I'm your host, Kacee Johnson, co founder and executive director of the AI Native Accounting Foundation. Today's guest is someone who has had a front row seat to the intersection of finance, governance, and technology for decades, really. Kimberly Ellison-Taylor is the past chair of the AICPA, a longtime leader at organizations like Oracle and KPMG, and today serves on several major corporate boards, including US Bank, Mutual of Omaha, and Marathon Petroleum. She's also helping shape the next generation of finance leaders through her work at Carnegie Mellon. Kimberly has always been someone who I know not just thinks about the profession as it is today, but what it is becoming. So, Kimberly, welcome. It is such a pleasure to see you.
Kacee, I cannot thank you enough. We don't spend enough time, my friend. We have got to get together. So thank you for inviting me to the podcast.
We need an in-person reunion too, but yes, at
For
least I
sure.
got some FaceTime with you. I'm happy for that.
Yes.
Um, Kimberly, to kick things off, I'm curious. You have such a unique lens in this profession. Where do you think accounting actually is with AI right now, and what is the part of that picture that most people are just getting wrong?
It's a great, great perspective to point out. But I'll tell you, we are being pulled, whether we want to be or not, because we're using applications and systems that have AI capabilities already built in. So, on one hand, I would say we are moving along because as we think about our ERP systems, our CRM systems, our internal practice management systems, they already have AI capability. But the intentional use of I would say we're still on the early end. And I think we still have significant work to do because we still need to think about the transformational aspects of it, and we still need to think about the people and what's going to happen with our clients. And we're still thinking about it. And to some degree, some of the market is still evolving. When we say responsible AI, right now it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So we know there's still work to be done. The good news is that we're still talking about it and we're talking about it increasingly, and our clients are asking us about it. So I have no doubt, whether we want to or not, kicking and screaming, we're going. It's just a matter of how fast some of us will go.
AI is coming into all of these systems, regardless of if we know we're implementing AI or not, right? And so I'm curious, because you have this board seat at some very large organizations, it makes me think about this current environment is a little reminiscent of the early cybersecurity conversations, I don't know, 15 years ago, where boards suddenly realized this was not just an IT issue, but a governance issue. And I'm curious if you see the same thing happening with AI right now.
I think it's absolutely the case. And I would say, not to speak for any one of my boards in particular, but when you think about people would try to put cybersecurity under the CIO, then we got the CISO, and then someone said, oh my gosh, there's cyber implications in every aspect of what we do and how we do it. We need to have them sitting at the table. I think that's the same conversation that's happening with AI because increasingly we realize it's a path to competitive advantage, but there are still some hallmarks that we need to be paying attention to. And I think it's exactly the same path.
And to your point, like every board and every organization is a little different, but what do you think corporate directors are looking for from their operators in terms of AI use and strategy?
So it's a great question because even from a board director perspective, many of us are still evolving as well. Now, fortunately for us, we have responsibility for oversight. And that means we get to ask great questions about the risk, the productivity, the capital allocation. What does it mean for the workforce? But having a background in technology, which I'm very fortunate to have, it does give me an understanding of what some of those answers could be or should be whenever board directors, and in this case me, ask those questions. So I would say we have to first start with every single group is evolving, and that definitely includes board directors. Now, as it relates to what we would expect of an operator, we expect thoughtful, disciplined, trustworthy systems that have explainability, that for me are tied into a data architecture and enterprise strategy on how we leverage data. What new risk are we introducing into the environment, and how are we going to mitigate those? And even as we think about mitigating those risks, what are we going to do to ensure that we can explain the decisions we make to our internal stakeholders as well as our external stakeholders? And if there is someone, and not every company has someone designated for AI, but whoever the person is who is wearing that hat, we expect them to have thought it through and to really, hopefully, the horse is not out of the barn. And from a governance perspective, that they've thought through what governance looks like and what the risk framework needs to look like in order to make this work for not just now, but long term.
It's such a good point. I hear so much where CEOs feel all this pressure from boards to implement, and they've got this sense of FOMO of like, we're so behind. So, what signals does a board look for to see that management is being thoughtful and not just reactive?
Well, we first have to be talking about it because I presume, at least for I'm on nonprofit, public, and private boards. So, in general, I presume that the leadership teams are reading what I read. I don't want to be that board director that every day is sending them a download of every single thing that I'm reading. But there are some times when they're like, Kimberly, please do. If you're reading something really great, please send it over. I might miss it. And if that's welcome, then I'm happy to send, of course, in the appropriate manner. I think that when we say, are we missing anything? Do we have FOMO? Everyone's talking such a good game about AI. And Casey, when I hear it, I'm listening for certain things. And if I don't hear about data architecture, data literacy, I'm like, okay, they're really not doing anything. They're just talking a good game. If we're talking about AI and not talking about some of the same results that we would expect with any strategic capital allocation, then I'm thinking this is still really small. It's a pilot inside their organization. They have not scaled it for prime time. So I know that the pressure is to talk about it whether you have it or not, but we have to have you talk about it so we can know if there is a disciplined process in place. People are still looking for trust. And the systems have to be trustworthy. From an accounting finance perspective, I'm looking for us to, as board directors, to have professional skepticism, and from an oversight perspective, to ask those critical questions around, when do we have a human in the loop? When do we have compensating controls to know if there's a model drift, if there's bias in the system, if we've introduced new liability into the system? So, yes, I think we should move quickly, but we should move prudently with discipline quickly, not just quickly, because moving quickly just to keep up with the Joneses is not going to be a path for success.
Well, and you bring up such a good point when you just think about the foundation of the profession. And so your point around explainability, it's like, well, the profession, we built its reputation on trust, transparency, accountability, and AI adds a whole new layer to that. But if a company can't explain how its AI system arrived at a recommendation, is that acceptable?
No, generally, no. But I know there are instances where the model could be so complex, Monte Carlo simulations, the deep dives, I'm sure 10 levels of pivot tables to come up with this answer. But that means we need more information at a high level, just as regular people, about the inputs, the logic, the guardrails, and the compensating controls that are built into the system to know if the model is drifting. And it's all about those guardrails that are put in that would help give comfort. Now, except for those extreme cases, in general, we should have some idea of how the system came up with the answer. And that's why when people are afraid that their jobs are going to be replaced, I think their jobs are going to be redesigned. And I think they're going to be redesigned to focus more on structure, critical judgment, problem solving, really interrogating the system to make sure it's producing the expected responses. I don't think that we're going to be able to say, oh no, we don't need the people anymore. We've got our AI systems, we're good. So, FOMO is definitely a factor. The risk that people are potentially introducing by not having explainability is a factor. It's liability. Casey, when you can't explain how you came up with an answer, you are introducing liability into the environment. And I would say we have delegated the responsibility. But the accountability, today at least, lies with a human. And that accountability is the CEO, if we're talking about boards, or the operator who is in charge of that particular area.
And you brought up to an interesting point. You mentioned capital allocation. Obviously, in my opinion, what I hear, I was just talking with a top 15 firm, and we talked about ROI, and he was like, "Kacee, it's BS. We cannot show ROI on our AI initiatives yet. We can make up what we think in terms of time savings and all of this, but." I guess my question to you would be, how should leaders think about funding AI initiatives responsibly? And are boards expecting clear ROI in the next 12, 18, 24 months?
I think when he says we can't tell ROI, I think it's because of what he's thinking ROI is. From my vantage point, I'm looking at speeds to decisions. I'm looking at greater productivity per employee. 10 times X, especially if they're developers. Did we help reduce risk in an environment, especially as we talk about the control environment? I'm looking for ways that we can help the organization grow the top and bottom line across several business units. The ROI may not be in one business unit. It may be across several. And so in order to start counting, you have to count the benefits that happened when the process was reduced to three times less steps as it was before, because sometimes you have a process that is very long. It takes a long time to get an answer. You got 5 systems you have to talk to, and then that makes our response time back to our stakeholders lengthy. Well, what if you could speed that up? And
Mm.
what if, as you do your postmortem to see, did we do the answer? Was it a great response? And you realize that because we are able to respond more quickly, our innovations happen more quickly. Our customers were able to start with us, end with us, not have some intermediary come in and take business from us because we were there when they expected us to be there. Not that we were still thinking about it back at the ranch. We know that we're adding value to our clients in a more predictable, productive, proactive way. And I think that's how you measure it. Now, some of that you could say, well, it's not the hardcore, what's happening to EBITDA, and does this actually help us with our tax strategy? But I do think that it could add long term benefits, but we have to capture all of the places where it could be benefiting us, not just only on the numbers and did we save money. I think in the long term we will, but in the short term we may not.
You have some kind of untapped business opportunity of developing like rock star corporate directors. Like, we need
Woohoo!
to, we need to clone you so that more think like you.
The benefit of being on a board is that you got a lot of people who think different ways. But with any new capability that comes into the marketplace, we have to think, okay, where have we seen this before? Now, of course, this is so transformational because it impacts the people, the process, the technology. It's going to impact how we work, when we work, if we work, and how we engage with our clients. But I think that for some people, they're like putting on their BS monitor and they're like, oh, I don't know. This is the hype cycle. We're in a trough of disillusionment. I don't know if this is working. But I do think that over time, we will start to see a lot of the benefits that people are talking about. They may not be happening right away. I think it is going to take some experimentation, but I think we need to control that experimentation, guardrail it, get a innovation sandbox so that you can try it out and then scale it. But I would say in no way should we be waiting until we think it's there. Because Kacee, I don't know what there is, because there is going to keep moving. So my advice is to just get started and then do pilots, work on your governance, make sure that it's scaling in a way that makes sense for your sector and for your strategic goals.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when you hear that mindset of, "Oh, okay, we've implemented this or done this, check the box, we've been innovative and like it's done." Like this is never ending. This is going to be a
No.
constant journey. Yeah.
Like,
It's
you're
not a
an innovation
destination.
person. I mean,
Yeah.
you're an innovation person like I am. So, it's so funny, Casey, the other day, I was just saying to someone that every problem isn't a technology problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you gotta start with the people, you gotta look at the process, and then determine if it's a technology problem. Now, I don't know if you're seeing this. I'm concerned that everything that happens, everyone's saying AI, 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 when we should still be thinking about applying the right solution to solve the right business problem.
I guess part of the problem and where I was bringing up like the FOMO is they're just implementing another tool, implementing another thing that anybody can buy from the marketplace, right? But they're not even thinking strategically about, well, what are the big problems or the opportunities that we're trying to solve for or capitalize on? So it's like we've got to pause, time out, don't get ahead of ourselves, and start there. So, yeah.
100%. 100%.
But, I'm curious, you brought up talent, and I know you're very passionate about talent in the profession. One of the narratives that showed up early on in the AI conversation was that this was going to trigger mass layoffs in professional services. But when you actually look at accounting firms today, that hasn't really happened. If anything, firms still feel capacity strained. So I'm curious how you interpret that. Do you think that AI will eventually reduce headcount in the profession, or are we heading toward a world where the number of the professionals stays roughly the same, but the work just changes?
I think the work will significantly change. I do think that there will be positions that we will have to redeploy in a different way. And I say that because we know that we're trying to automate functions that are easy to deploy a bot or an agent for. And so that might be setting up patient appointments. That might be setting up an agent that goes out every day and checks your calendar and tells you what you're doing. So, who are those people that are in those roles? It could be AR, AP, claims processing, things that we want to reduce friction. Any area where you want to reduce friction, there is an opportunity to automate. We were talking about this with robotics process automation, if you remember, under just traditional AI.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a goal and an objective under just plain vanilla traditional AI, let alone now we have the opportunity to deploy agents and bots to help us with more strategic tasks. I think there will be some opportunity for us to rethink our workforce, how we train them, how we deploy them. I think there's an opportunity for the higher education system to think about the critical judgment and what we need on the front end of someone's career as compared to what you and I may have done when we were starting our careers. And I think everyone has to rethink that. When we start talking about reskilling and upskilling, I don't think this is a matter of saying, let's take our human capabilities and leadership skill set and then just switch it over to an agent. We're going to have to onboard agents and bots. We're going to have a governance structure for how they operate, when they operate, what we expect, have those success and key performance indicators identified up front. And I think we're going to have to think about how we leverage people and get them to actually provide the insights that come from all this data now that they're going to have access to. Now, what do we do? And the storytelling, the communication skills, the actually working with clients more directly, going into new business areas that today we haven't even thought about. When I was growing up in my career, we did not have search engine optimization or search digital anything. We went through a period where it was like EDP and then ADP, and now everything is digital everything. And I do believe new industries, new markets will evolve. But I think in the short term, there will be some disruptions to talent. Now, if we're being responsible, we're already thinking about opportunities that we help people move into to rethink the role that they have today and evolve it into other things that we need from them. Most people's jobs include a number of different tasks. It's not just one thing. So that's why it's hard to say the bot is going to, reduce people because someone's job may be 10 things, but only 4 or 5 of them are things that a bot could do. The other 5 things are things that you need a human in the loop to do or have a very human focused interface. So you've taken 50% of the role and you've given it to the bots, and they've kept the 50% of the role. And now, in order to make this more strategic and competitive, we need to think about what else can we have that person do? And that may be helping more specifically, I think, with clients and projects that are going to help the strategic goals that were set in place.
I mean, you're very tightly woven in with the AICPA, and you know how big of a lift it's been about upskilling. I'm curious though, because you do have experience in a lens into multiple industries, technology, banking, oil, as well as in the profession and public accounting, as well as on the finance side, even for that. Are you seeing that they're investing more in the past, let's just call it 2 years, in upskilling? And are any of those industries investing better, stronger, more? Are any laggards in this respect?
Well, in general, and I will say this more from my role as an adjunct professor for Carnegie Mellon, I think that people will spend more money on the investment than they do on the talent capacity. And I don't think you can spend 15 million on a new AI investment and spend 15 cents on training your team to do the work. So when we think about the capital allocation strategy, it has to include the people. And I think right now we're just happy to get the money and we're like, we'll figure out the people sometimes after the fact. Or sometimes people are thinking, well, we can cut the training budget because we're going to use all this and we're not going to need the training. When this is where you really need the training, like double down, put your foot on the pedal, get more training so that people can feel prepared and that we don't create this chasm in the work environment of the people who are AI fluent or AI fearful because they're worried that they will not have a job. I think we have to align everyone around what we're doing, give people an opportunity to play around with it in a sandbox so it doesn't happen that they're worried about what's going to happen next. I would give everyone an opportunity to maybe come up with the next evolution of their own roles, like a hackathon, and let everyone contribute ideas to how they see their role evolving and how productive that role can be. And if you think about, let's say, TurboTax, I know people were probably very much concerned about TurboTax and its impact on tax preparers. But I can tell you, I know several tax preparers who are always struggling for more bandwidth during the tax seasons, and they're working year round. And TurboTax may have initially had an impact on the profession, but I think we absorbed that, develop new capacity, new capability, and you still have clients who would still prefer to have someone else do their taxes. They don't want to do it themselves. And I just think it'll follow that same line.
And I agree with you. I have heard this tax season has been more grueling than the past few years. And it's interesting your point on like this creation of a two-tier workforce, right? The AI fluent versus AI fearful. How or what I should say leadership behaviors become more important in this AI enabled organization to avoid that? Because it all starts at the top.
Oh, it totally does. But here's the thing, we're busy because every time there's uncertainty, This is where the profession shines because people rely on us for trust. They rely on us to navigate through the uncertainty. We're in a very volatile environment. We just had a new tax bill come into place last year. And what I say to her colleagues in tax, I'm like, wow, you are like critical, necessary, essential, and needed. And yet many of them are leveraging AI tools to do that research. I mean, imagine, and they've been doing it, but imagine, and that was traditional AI. Now imagine if they were doing all of those things by hand or going into a library trying to flip through books or online going one by one as opposed to having an LLM that they can now query and ask questions and interrogate in a safe way and then have a memory of that. So I do think that people are concerned, but I will tell you if the leaders at the top of the organization free up capacity, they cannot be so busy that people working 50 hours a week, you want them to be AI skilled. When are they going to be AI skilled? You in order to lead from the front, you've got to tell people an hour every day we want you to work on these skills. We have these tools. And by the end of each week, you should have at least have, 4 or 5 hours that we have invested. And we need you to match that energy. But it's not going to happen if your people are working 50 hours a week and you're like, well, go off and figure out how to do AI. Casey, leaders have to free their people up in an intentional way. And when we were in college, we had a free hour where there were no classes, there was nothing going on. I think we're going to have a free hour as much as, people can to encourage their people to get up to speed and to have lunch and learns, have people go to conferences, bring the information back, have demonstrations and maybe in the break room, maybe find if people are hybrid, they're not in the office, they're at the client site or they're somewhere else, have time frames that are open because they're on demand. I've heard of some really great training vehicles that are on demand where people can be encouraged to go out and they start at all levels. Very, very basic, the foundations, all the way up to someone who is well versed in prompt engineering. And you figure out what they need in order to be more productive. And I think that's what they're going to have to do. And they can't just say, well, why aren't they doing it? I've been telling them they should go and do it. Well, no, you're gonna have to show them that you're doing it, and then that's what I think will help.
I love this. And people are always talking about, well, we need to do this, but not talking about the how. Kimberly is giving you a how right here.
Yes,
So
you gotta get the help, because otherwise we'll be still talking about this, Casey, and they've gotta know that without people, it's not gonna work.
it's true. My husband, he's in technology, and his company says 15 hours a month is the minimum that we want you to just upskill yourself. And they tell them, do these micro learnings of 20-minute things, but then take the rest of your hour to think about it, process it, and how does this apply to the org, to your role, whatever, rather than just, okay, now hop on your next Zoom.
I love that. And I said an hour, but I'm sure that hour includes systems that they're already using to do their role. So I don't want to freak out any of our CEOs who are listening or COOs. They're like, how are we going to get them to do an hour? Because they're already doing it. Because remember, you have many AI powered systems inside your organization already. They should be leveraging, using those a little more, drilling down and maximizing the capabilities of that system that you spend a lot of money on, but I bet you people are only touching the top, 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 top tier of what could be great capabilities.
And you have experience with all of this because you are an educator, you have students, and I'm sure which, by the way, when you were saying that, can you imagine if when we were at university, if we had these kind of tools available to us? Like, it's
No, and
just
my students are executives. I'm in
uh
executive education, Casey. So these are
yeah.
brilliant, smart people, and they are trying to make sure that they are maximizing it. Technology in general, but especially AI. And what I say is one of the risk factors is lack of imagination. I really do think that we are trained as risk-based professionals And what happens is that we can tell you 100 different reasons or ways that something could fail, but it means we need to turn our brain a little differently to think about what it would take to make it succeed. And with AI, we need to think about the art of the possible and not just what has been done. Because when you're thinking about risk, you're like, well, if it's been done, that's less risky. Well, we're asking you to do some things that haven't been done before. Try those things out because if you want to get big, bets, you got to take some big risks sometimes because little incremental processes are only going to result in incremental results.
And so what is your view? It can be a little divisive among educators about AI's role in learning. And it was funny, I was at a BDO event last year speaking, and a gentleman raised his hand, and he was, a senior partner, and said, okay, if you're telling me that these AI systems are going to be my, junior associate coming out of college, and that they're going to use AI for all of this, well, then they don't understand the how, right? AI is great at the what, but not, it doesn't understand the context. So how, if they are managing the AI, do they look at, well, why did it end up here? Is this right? And we kind of end up with a little bit of cognitive debt, right? So I'm just curious, as you are an educator, what's your thinking in how much should they be using LLMs, and how we solve for that in a profession where, to get to the senior level, you got to do the work and understand why it's done the way it is.
Absolutely. That's why I think people will still be needed. And I think critical judgment and will be still needed. Problem solving will be still needed because you still need to know the how so that you will know when it's hallucinating. Because if we cannot just accept the answer, there's got to be someone that is periodically or at least looking at all of these responses to say, is this the expected response? There are life and death systems that require people to be in the loop. And so when you think about from an educator perspective, I'm also a guest lecturer in many universities. There are some, Casey, that are their students are using paper and pencil because the fixation is on cheating and not cheating. And I think that is a factor for sure. But I think it should be more on how do we test someone's leverage of technology and their critical thinking. And I would say, if you know, because the genie is out of the bottle. If they think students are not going to use it, and the only way they can really guarantee that is to say you don't use it at all, I think we're putting our students at a disadvantage. I would give them, let's say, if there were 15 things that should be in a fact pattern of a word problem, give them 7 and ask them to figure out what else you need to know in order to answer this particular question or to solve it. Because by giving them incomplete information, they have to know that it's incomplete in order to answer it. So that's how you get to the problem solving and good judgment because you would force them to have to do the research. And then I would say if you're going to use an LLM, then you have to cite it as a source so that we know. And you have to be responsible for, if it's behind a paywall, pay the person, the author, or pay whatever wherever you got it from. Be ethical in your use of AI. And I think they should still have to get all those 10 sources and the MLA, APA style format. I think we leverage it in and we say, we're going to assume that you're going to use it. But as a result, you're going to have to work for it. It's going to take some work for you to figure out this word problem because you now have access to a world of information that you can go out and find it. Now, that pushing and simulation thinking will help them if they decide they're going to go and try to do the CPA exam or any of the other credential exams.
Guardrails and transparency, right? Whether you're talking about in the profession and in practice, or as a student, learn it young and apply those frameworks early with the way that you use all of these tools. So before we get into the lightning round, I do want to zoom out a bit. I work at Be Radical with Pascal, and we talk a lot about Amara's law and how we tend to overestimate any kind of technology shifts impact on the short term, but then underestimate the long-term structural change.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned earlier about the hype cycle. I'm just curious, when you think about specifically in accounting and finance for the next decade, what do you think we're underestimating and we're overestimating right now?
I think we may be overestimating the number of people who are actually using it right now, because we feel that our company is behind when really we're all probably in the same boat. So we're definitely overestimating that. I think we could also be overestimating how much in terms of cost savings, and you mentioned this earlier, that it actually will achieve. Because if the only reason is someone's doing it for cost savings, I think that's gonna be a problem, because I think there are other measures like productivity, innovation, speed of decisions, greater collaboration, better client experience, better customer experience, reduce the friction, all of these other things that maybe we were getting by with, so maybe it doesn't feel like a benefit. Because you might say, "Well, Kimberly, we weren't doing them great maybe, but we were getting by, and now you're telling me that the benefit is that we're gonna do it better." Yes, because as people start to use AI more and more, what was the bar is going to shift higher. And so, what was okay yesterday is not going to be okay tomorrow. So, we got to get better at doing some of those things. I think that we are underestimating the impact it will truly have on clients selecting us. And it will underestimate because clients want to know that if they're doing it, that we would be expecting you to do it as well. You couldn't, if you were in the accounting and finance profession, you can't come with a 15% increase year over year. You're going to have to leverage technology. The risk and complexity of operations certainly will only grow. How are you, if you're an external auditor, how are you managing those risks for your audit as you do audit procedures, as you assess risk, as you review the transactions and you look for anomalies? You're trying to make sure that fraud and detecting fraud is always in the forefront and thought of what you're thinking about, especially if you're in a global, multinational environment. The rules, the laws, the compliance only getting more and more complex, especially with geopolitical conflict. So your clients are not just going to be expecting you to do it, they're going to make business decisions on who they want to be a value partner, because they want that partner to help lead them. Because that's another benefit of having someone who you believe is doing it across clients. I can't tell you how many times people would say, "Oh, well, do you have insights from your other clients?" Well, if you're not doing it across your other clients, you have no insights. So I think that's something we should be working on, because clients will be demanding it. And I think as young people get their arms around this, and they will, they're going to fully want to go and work for someone who has great thinking about curiosity, about experimentation, about collaboration, and it's going to help put them in a better position to be a third year team member, even as they come out of school in their first year, because the AI is going to help complement their skill set, because they're going to do some of those entry level things. I think that's definitely going to be a factor. So people may be underestimating how much AI is going to change how they go to market, how they work with clients, how team members inside view their organization. Everyone's talking about great places to work, everyone takes pride, but will you feel that same pride if you think your organization is behind your firm as it relates to technology? Wherever we are with AI today, it's a moving target. It's not going to stay the same. I don't know what AI version we're going to be at next year. I don't know what AI version we're going to be at in 2 months from now. I just know it will not be exactly what we're doing right now. And if they think this is a steady state, I think they're underestimating how quickly this is going to accelerate. And 2030 is around the corner. I can't even imagine what we'll be doing from a process perspective in 2030. And I think they could be underestimating that speed of change and how much people will be expecting.
I couldn't agree more about the client stuff. I mean, I truly wonder too, how many of these practitioners are prepared? Obviously, embedded finance, if your client is getting the answers about the numbers from the tech before you as a firm can even pick up the phone, that changes the entire dynamic of a relationship and the expectations change. So I worry about that a little bit. Yeah.
I worry too because I know it's because we're so busy. I mean, we're heads down working on this, working on the work that they have right in front of them.
Mhm.
Someone, and I know it's not a lot of real estate of people available, but somebody in the firm has to be thinking about how we are transforming even as we're working on today's work.
All very important things to think about. And thank you. I've got a quick lightning round for you if
Sure.
you're up for it. Okay. So I've shared this story with you before, but you gave me a massive aha Oprah moment, right? In my career years ago. And I'm just curious if you ever had an aha moment and how did it change you personally because of it?
I spent a lot of my career, Casey, thinking that I needed to be technically smart. And I do think that is important. I got the CPA, I got the CIA now, CISA, I'm an NACD certified director, I got the MBA, I got the Master of Science in IT. But none of that really matters if people don't feel the connection. And I know that in a profession where book smarts and being technically smart was like a huge focal point. As a matter of fact, that's how people, many of them got promoted, but it still comes down to people. And increasingly, it comes back to people. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. And once I understood that, I understood that it was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay to say I didn't know. It was okay not to be perfect. And that the more I wasn't perfect, the more people connected with me. And I don't know if that's like SpongeBob. If you have kids, you ever watch SpongeBob and somebody falls down and kids in the audience are like, oh, I don't know. I don't think it's that. I just think that people know that we're human and that we're all a work in progress, and so, yes, you could be a student accounting, you could be a student technology, but if you don't get that people part right across all people, it is not gonna work. It is just not going to work. There are plenty of smart people that I've looked at as far as leaders are concerned, and they may have been the smart nerd, traditional nerd, but they always had the people leader to help them execute. And that was the person that could go out and get the development dollars, that could go out and get the people sold, that could go out and get their families some chip in money that they didn't even want or knew they had. That was the people who work with the government people, the regulators, and to sell business, it still comes back to people. And I think that's my aha moment. Like, I've learned that over and over and over again.
Well, you are fantastic though at making people feel seen and heard. So thank you for that. The audience, if you watch or follow Kimberly, yes, is her.
Yes, it is my thing. I just said it. Yes, it is my thing.
Very good. All right. What's an AI tool that you use personally, not necessarily professionally?
It's interesting because I like Claude Gemini, Copilot, and OpenAI. And there are others that are embedded in systems that I rely on as I'm using them, but those are the ones that I'm experimenting right now with agents. And so
Isn't
it'll
it
be interesting
funny?
to see which ones.
Yeah, isn't it funny how certain ones just work so much better for certain things versus it's like,
So you end up with more than one. Most
yeah.
people, if they're using them now, which ones are you using, Casey?
So I've been using Perplexity for just like it's replaced basically Google searches for me. Like that's like my new Google search is Perplexity. I still use OpenAI for a lot of stuff, but the new Claude Cowork.
Woo! Claude Cowork is powerful.
Yeah. So that one is a good one for me. All right. Favorite book right now or book that you would recommend to the audience?
It's so to the audience. So it's so interesting because I like Malcolm Gladwell. I will go back and read books I've read and get insights that I didn't know I was even gonna get. Like, so Malcolm Gladwell, Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, because I think how we are handling AI is reminiscent of some problems and leadership that we've done earlier. I've gone back to good to great. I've gone back to the innovator's dilemma because some of this is just pure leadership. And we need to make sure we have leadership in play to help us.
It's so funny you say that. Look what's on my desk. Three
You
minds.
you gotta go back to now, there are so many great authors out there. I don't wanna miss anybody, but I know that the classics, because it's timeless, the things that they said were timeless.
I completely agree. Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me today and for all that you do for the profession. Your perspective across not just this space, but technology, boardroom, and classroom really connect dots in ways that nobody else can. So thank you so much. I can't wait till we can be in person and give you a hug. So thank you.
I'm waiting for it. Absolutely. Have a good day.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. If you're interested in the broader mission behind this podcast, visit ainativeaccounting.org to learn more about the AI Native Accounting Foundation and the work that we're doing to advance responsible AI adoption. Thank you to our sponsor, Digits. If you are interested in becoming an AI native firm, visit digits.com to learn more. You can stream all of our episodes on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast platform. CPE is available through Earmark. Until next time, I'm going to take a cue from Kimberly here. Stay curious, stay thoughtful, responsible, and stay ahead. Thank you.